we've made some progress. As you can tell, the drywall's off the entire wall, and it looks really, really good. We're in just great shape. This is a stud that's right in the center of the truss, and we verified that by checking the dimensions. This is right in the center of the room, so that's kind of a good thing. And remember in the other video I told you that you have to really be careful. You just can't start beating into the wall because you might hit something. Well, look at this. I knew this was going to be here because I had looked outside. I had a clue. So look at that electrical, those electrical cables. What they're feeding is an outdoor spotlight. And I had gone outside before we started this demolition just to see if anything was out there, and sure enough, there's the spotlight. Now, this cable could have been fed from above, or it could come up from below, or it could come sideways. You know, you just don't know which way, but you do know that there's an electrical cable behind the wall if you look on the other side. So we just wanted to be really careful, and once I peeled back the insulation, I could see readily, you know, the electric cable. All right, so now the next step is we're going to take the rest of the insulation out, and we're going to start to put in our first king stud. And I'm going to go ahead and put it on this side. And once we get that first king stud in, you know, which starts to define the rough opening, then we know automatically from the dimensions, and I'll show you how to do that math, where the next king stud should go. And then that allows us to get ready to cut our header and to cut our rough sill. So we're going to have a lot of fun here. It's not going to take a lot of time, but we're going to get those king studs in, and we're going to get ready to do some framing. And I'll show each step in each successive video. It's time to show you how to put in a header in a wood frame wall. And let's go over kind of where we're at. If this should make sense to you. It's really pretty simple. All the drywall's gone. All of the insulation's gone. And here's an original stud right here, if you remember. This is an original stud. This is an original stud, and over here is an original one. And this one right here is original. But look at these funny studs that are here right now. Here's one here. Here's one here. These are king studs. And these are studs that run solid all the way from the floor plate all the way up to the top plate. And what's going to happen is this is the start of the support system to put in the header. So you have to put in both king studs. Make sure your measurement's right, make sure the width's right. And what it turns out to be in our case is this distance from here to over to the next king stud is 3 inches more than the rough opening width that I'm shooting for. The reason why is I am putting in, you know, this rough opening is only about 60 inches or so. So since it's less than 6 feet, I can get by with just one trimmer stud here, or one jack stud. So that means if I put one here, one on the other side, that's adding an extra 3 inches total. So my rough opening is going to be correct. So you got to think that through. You got to look at the plans. You have to understand how many of your trimmer or jack studs you have to put in to support the header. And generally the rule of thumb is 6 feet or less, you can use one. Anything over 6 feet, you got to use two. And if you're putting in an enormous beam, and by that time you probably need some drawings from an engineer, you might have to put 3 at each end. But if you're doing on a beam that big, you might be you're probably, you know, way out of your comfort zone. So don't worry about that. Okay, so the next step is, what I like to do is I want to go ahead and put the header in and get that finished, and then I can measure down from the header to know exactly where to put my sill in, you know, the rough sill. So we're going to show those in different videos, but I've already marked out up here the cut line. You can probably see them right here. I did the measurements. These are the lines right here, and on the other side, that's what I have to cut, you know, so that I can get my header in. And in my case, because I've got such a small opening and there's so very little weight up there, in my situation, I can get by with 2 2x6s. That's all I'm going to use. As far as the size of your header, frequently you're going to have that engineered, or you're going to have to bring in an architect, because everybody's house is different. There's all types of different load situations, so I can't help you size your header. I mean, I'd have to be at your house. That's the way it works. So in the next video, I'm going to show you what it's like after we have actually cut out one of these, and you can see how easy it really is to get ready to put this header in. Let's go ahead and make our first cut to where we're going to, you know, be able to put in the header. So I've already got this line marked. I marked it on both sides of the stud. I've got a pencil line on the side here that you can't see, I've got an equal one on this side, and I'll check periodically to make sure that I'm cutting, you know, along that line on both sides. I like to use a reciprocating saw. It's got a nice aggressive wood blade here, very sharp teeth, and does a really, really good job. So let's go ahead and cut it. It won't take long. It won't take long at all. All right, you can see right on the line, we're in really, really good shape. It's really that simple, you know, to make the cuts, to be able to get your header in. Just have to do the same thing on the other ones, make a cut a little bit farther down to knock out this piece so that we can slip in the header. And we'll go ahead and get all that done, and we'll show you exactly what it looks like when we're finished. Well, we're making progress. We cut out the 3 slots. I went ahead and slid in the first piece of the header. Let's take a look. So look at that. Fits perfectly. You know, we cut it. It's the right length. All the cuts are nice. All of these studs are touching the top of the header. The header's flush against the OSB board. And all we have to do now is I'm going to nail it. I can toenail it this side just to hold it in place. You know, a couple of nails right here. And do the same down at this end. Let's go ahead and do that. I'll show you how simple it is, and we'll have this header in no time flat. Watch this. I'm going to go ahead and use my framing nail gun. They're really handy tools. Watch this. Simple as that. Now we just have to put in some 2x3 blocks to be able to space it out, get the last header part on, you know, the front header, and we're going to be good to go. We're going to be in great shape, actually. And then we just have to put our trimmer studs on, our sill. We're going to have a rough opening. It's that simple. Okay, we've got the header, the second header piece in. You can see that, and it's temporarily nailed. You know, it can't really support any weight right now because it doesn't have any support underneath here. We've just got nails in there. But there's not a lot of weight up here. And if you're putting in a header where you are in a load-bearing situation, you know, you're going to have to put up a temporary wall on one side or the other to take that weight. So you can't just make these cuts like I did on a load-bearing wall. That should be a common sense issue. Now what's going to happen next? Here's the next piece of framing lumber we're going to put in. This is a trimmer stud or a jack stud. And what's going to happen is it's going to come in here. It's going to get nailed to the side, you know, to this other king stud. It's going to be tied up here against the headers. And this is where the sill will go in. You know, we have to put in a rough sill. So I just wanted to show you that this is how we already know that this is the correct height. So we can go ahead and put this in next, just temporarily nail it into place, and it's going to give us the guide mark of where the sill, the rough sill, needs to go, so it's in the exact right spot. I've got the studs cut out of the wall, and we've got the trimmer studs in, so you can see the rough openings really taking shape. Let's take a look at it right now. Well, here it is. You can see there's the header, and of course both trimmer studs are in. The one on the left here and the one on the right. And if you remember, you know, we had 3 studs. There's the original tops of the studs, but they're all gone now. I went ahead and made the cut line down here for the sill, which was really easy to do. You know, all that we did here to make this, to find out the right height to cut the rest of the studs off, is just a matter of taking a block of 2x4 here, or 2x6, you know, and then making a mark underneath it. You can see this pencil mark right here. So that would be the bottom of the sill, and then just make a level line all the way across, and that produced the line where I had to make the cuts. And it now just becomes a simple matter of just sliding the sill in, and let's see what that looks like. All right, there you go. So the sill's in place, and just becomes a matter now of, you know, nailing down through, into each of the cripple studs. And then we just have one last thing to do. So understand, remember how we talked about how the header is really just like a horizontal steel I-beam in a skyscraper. And those I-beams get supported by columns. So this jack or trimmer stud is the column that supports it. Well, look what happens. You have to transfer that load all the way down. And of course, the trimmer stud sits on top of the sill. Well, look at this. There's nothing here. Well, we have to now cut a piece of 2x6 that will fill in the gap between the bottom of the sill and extend down to the top plate. And of course, it's really that simple. That's all you have to do to create the rough opening and to support the header. And that transfers the load of the header all the way down to the foundation eventually, because you've got solid bearing underneath the plate here. It's really that simple. I want to talk a little bit now about how close we are to finishing the rough opening. Look at this right here. So once again, the header's in. We've got this trimmer or jack stud in. It's completely nailed. I've got about 6 nails in it into the king stud here. And the sill's now in. So you can see, this is the good news. The point is that the rough opening is now created. The header's in. The last thing that we have to do is put in the trimmer stud below the sill. So you notice right here there's a gap. And we just have to cut the stud that's going to go from tight up underneath the sill down to the bottom plate of the wall, and then that completes the transfer of the weight from the header down to solid bearing, which eventually would go down to the foundation, which would eventually go down to the footer, which would eventually go down to the soil. And that's one thing to understand about these headers. And when you create a bearing points like that, because that's what this is considered a bearing point, you always have to make sure that you have solid bearing all the way down to the foundation. So here's what you can't do. Imagine if you had a plate, like this was a wall plate, and you had a stud where my hand is here and a stud here, and then there was just a gap. I mean, there was no bearing underneath the plate, and you had these two things bearing in the middle of those two studs. This would bow down. That would be bad. So you have to have solid bearing. Just keep that in mind, all the way down to the foundation. You have to figure out how to do that. I mean, and if you're working on a second story, it can get a little dicey, because you have to basically you have to figure out how to get solid bearing. There's no easy way around it. If you want to discover more home improvement tips, go to askthebuilder.com.